Rick Hassen's a professor of law and political science, University of California, Los Angeles. You can read that piece on the importance of this trial on slate.com. Danya Perry is a former deputy New York Attorney General, served as deputy chief of the Criminal Division, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, and they both join me now. Rick, that headline really grabbed me yesterday, and I really liked the piece. Why do you think this is the most important trial in the nation's history?
Well, unlike the other claims against Trump for the classified documents or the hush money, they don't really go to our democracy itself. It might be terrible to leak national secrets, but it's not the same thing as trying to subvert an election. And really, as I argue in the piece, Trump has not been held accountable anywhere. He was not convicted in the Senate. There's been no civil liability. This is really the only chance to hold him liable for trying to essentially end American democracy. And if he can get away with this without even trying to put him on trial, that would embolden not just Trump, but any future candidate who might look for extra legal means to try to turn himself from an election loser into an election winner.
Yeah, you know, I've said this before, but it's, you know, the U.S. is not the only country in the world. There are many countries that have had many experiences with different forms of government, and there have been attempted coups in countries that were democracies. And generally, you know, when you try to do a coup, it's sort of a shoot the moon situation, right? Like, you succeed and you become the person in power, or you don't succeed and you end up in prison or worse. It's a very weird situation to try a coup, fail, and then just like hang out on the golf course for 2 years. It's not usually the way it goes in other places. It's generally understood that, like, this is criminal. And Danya, you've worked on sort of looking at a model prosecution memo and thinking about how the facts as revealed, you know, through the 800-plus page report of the Congressional Committee fit with the U.S. Criminal Code. And I'm curious what you think of the decisions made here by Smith and what the charges are and how strong the case is.
I think it's strong. It's a fairly, as you just explained, it's laid out in a pretty simple format, in easily understandable, digestible bits. The way it's organized, I think, and, you know, state by state, or as you said, kind of the sequence, the chronology, the story of the evolution of the false elector slate scheme, it's all just readily understandable. So I think it's very carefully crafted. And just to go to the point that you were just raising in terms of, you know, this question of defense of quote unquote free speech, you know, one only has to look at the statute and the elements for proving a conspiracy to defraud the United States. The elements are simple. There has to be a scheme to commit something unlawful. There has to be criminal intent. And there has to be an overt act in furtherance of that scheme. So a bunch of people just sitting around in a basement or in, you know, a state house plotting to submit a false electoral slate, that's not a crime. Doing anything in furtherance of it, and there are pages and pages, paragraph after paragraph of the overt acts that were done in furtherance, that is what takes this from something that could reside in the realm of First Amendment speech to the realm of criminal conspiracy that is actionable, and we'll see what a jury says, but perhaps, will actually end in a criminal conviction.
Let's talk about criminal intent, which is one of the most important aspects of this, too. And it's clear I think there's sort of three prongs to the defense. This is First Amendment protected speech. You're criminalizing speech and it's not conduct. There's he was relying on his lawyer's advice. They sort of trotted that out. And then the third one having to do with intent, and I'll read here today from his lawyer saying, I would like them to try to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Donald Trump believed that these allegations were false. Basically, Rick, the notion that he is essentially clinically deluded about the reality of the matter, despite the repeated evidence presented to him time and time again, cited in the indictment. And that clinical delusion means he's incapable of forming criminal intent. What do you think about that?
I think that's a really weak argument, besides the fact that there's good reason to believe he didn't actually think that he won the election. Imagine if he said to Mike Pence, I'm going to break your legs and hurt your family if you don't throw out the electoral votes from Wisconsin. Even if Trump believed that he had won the election, that would still be a crime. He'd be using words that wouldn't be protected by the First Amendment. So it's really kind of besides the point what he secretly believes or publicly says about whether the election was stolen. That doesn't give him the right to engage in criminal conduct. And that's what this indictment alleges.
What do you think, Danya?
I completely agree with Rick. That's not a defense. First of all, there's, of course, there is reams of evidence that show that everyone credible around him was saying there was no fraud, and the former president himself said things to that effect. But here, exactly, it's not a true defense. The question is not so much did he believe the election was truly stolen, but what acts, further to your point, did he and his co-conspirators take, regardless of his subjective state of mind? Did he believe that these electors that submitted their certificates to Congress, were they the true electors, right? Or did they, go in the basement somewhere and say that they were in the State House? There's so many questions like that.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Not did he still think it was stolen from him, but did the elector scheme, did they believe these electors were what they said they were, the rightful electors? And that, I think, is a tougher case to make. Rick Hasen, Danya Perry, thank you so much for your time.